What you are about to hear is a work of fiction. The people, places, and events depicted in this story are products of the author's imagination or used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual individuals, living or deceased, or to real situations is purely coincidental. These stories may explore themes of crime, injustice, and human suffering. While fictional, they reflect real emotions and difficult truths that some may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
You don't know him like I do, Emma. The man you're about to marry, he's done this before. Her brother Jake's words echoed in Emma's mind as she stood in the wedding dress boutique, staring at her reflection in the three-way mirror. The woman looking back at her suddenly seemed like a stranger, draped in white silk and lace, about to make the biggest mistake of her life. Before we go on, consider subscribing to the channel to be notified as new stories are published. Please let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know just how far our stories reach. But that confrontation was still weeks away. Emma's story began 6 months earlier on a rainy Thursday evening in downtown Chicago. At 39, Emma Richardson had built exactly the life she'd planned: a corner office on the 42nd floor of a gleaming tech company, a sleek condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, and a salary that afforded her every luxury she'd dreamed of as a struggling college student. What she hadn't planned for was the persistent loneliness that crept in during quiet evenings and weekend mornings. "You need to get back out there," her assistant, Vanessa, said for the 100th time, perched on the edge of Emma's desk with her usual determination. "It's been 12 years since your divorce." 12 years? That's longer than some people's entire marriages. Emma looked up from her laptop, pushing her dark-rimmed glasses up her nose. "I'm fine, Vanessa. I have my work. I have Jake." "Your brother doesn't count as a social life," Vanessa interrupted. "Look, I'm not saying you need to get married tomorrow, but maybe just try? There's this app, Elite Connections. It's for professionals, very selective. What's the worst that could happen?" Emma considered this. Her last serious relationship had ended 2 years ago when she discovered her boyfriend was more interested in her stock options than her personality. Since then, she'd thrown herself into work, earning promotion after promotion, but the success felt hollow when she had no one to share it with except her older brother Jake, who had his own life with his girlfriend of 3 years. "Fine," Emma said, surprising herself. "But I'm only doing this because you'll never stop pestering me otherwise." Vanessa beamed. "Trust me, Em, you deserve someone amazing." That weekend, Emma reluctantly created her profile on Elite Connections. She agonized over every word, finally settling on a description that highlighted her professional achievements while hinting at her desire for genuine connection. She uploaded her best photo, a candid shot from her company's charity gala, where her smile looked natural and her emerald dress brought out her green eyes. Within hours, she had several matches, but one stood out immediately. David Winters, 45, with kind blue eyes and silver-streaked hair that gave him a distinguished look. His profile showed a successful investment consultant who had been widowed 3 years earlier. His opening message was thoughtful and detailed, asking specific questions about her work in marketing and sharing a story about how his late wife had also worked in corporate communications. Their first video call stretched past midnight. David sat in what appeared to be a well-appointed home office, awards and certificates visible on the wall behind him. He spoke eloquently about his grief journey, his work helping clients plan their financial futures, and his hope of finding someone to share life's adventures with again. "I hope this doesn't sound forward," he said, his voice soft through her laptop speakers, "but talking with you feels like the first time I've been truly myself since Amy passed. You have this way of listening that makes me want to be honest about everything." Emma felt her heart flutter in a way it hadn't in years. "It doesn't sound forward at all. I feel the same connection." Over the following weeks, David became a constant presence in Emma's life. His good morning texts arrived precisely at 7 each day, always with something thoughtful, a weather update for her commute, a reminder about a presentation she'd mentioned. or simply a sweet message about how much he was looking forward to talking with her that day. Their lunch break phone calls became the highlight of Emma's afternoons. David remembered every detail she shared, the difficult client who was making her project complicated, her concerns about her brother Jake working too many hours, even her favorite coffee order from the cafe near her office. "You're the first person in years who actually listens when I talk about work," Emma told her friend Rebecca during their monthly dinner. "He doesn't just nod and wait for his turn to speak. He asks follow-up questions, offers advice. Yesterday he sent me an article about a marketing strategy that was perfect for the campaign I'm developing." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Sounds almost too good to be true. When do I get to meet this paragon of masculinity?" "Soon," Emma promised. "We're having our first in-person date this weekend." The anticipation built throughout the week. When Saturday arrived, Emma changed outfits 3 times before settling on a navy dress that was professional yet feminine. David had chosen Alinea, one of Chicago's most prestigious restaurants, for their first meeting. He was waiting in the lobby when she arrived, even more handsome in person than in his photos. He stood immediately when he saw her, his face lighting up with genuine pleasure. "Emma," he said, taking her hands gently, "you look absolutely radiant." "These are for you." He presented a bouquet of white orchids, her favorite flowers, which she'd mentioned during one of their conversations weeks earlier. The evening was perfect. David was attentive without being overwhelming, funny without trying too hard, and when the bill came, he insisted on paying despite Emma's protests. "My mother raised me to be a gentleman," he said with a smile. "Besides, this is my thank you for giving a grieving widower a chance at happiness again." As they walked along the lakefront after dinner, David shared more about his late wife. "Amy and I met in college," he said, his voice growing tender. "She was studying journalism, wanted to change the world with her writing. Cancer took her before she could fulfill all those dreams." He paused, looking out over the water. "I never thought I'd feel ready to love someone again, but talking with you these past few weeks, Emma, you've reminded me that my heart still works." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm honored that you're sharing this with me, David. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been." "It was, but grief taught me not to waste time when something real comes along, and what we have feels very real to me." Their second date was cooking dinner at Emma's condo. David arrived with bags from the gourmet market, insisting on preparing his grandmother's recipe for osso buco. As he moved around her kitchen with comfortable confidence, Emma found herself imagining what it would be like to have this warmth in her home every day. "I have to confess something," David said as they sat down to eat. "I may have forgotten my wallet in my other jacket. I'm mortified. I never do things like this." "Don't worry about it," Emma laughed. "I think I can cover groceries for one meal." "You're incredible," he said, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "Most women would think I'm either irresponsible or running some kind of scam." Emma squeezed back. "Well, if you're running a scam, it's an elaborate one. Besides, I make plenty of money. A few groceries won't bankrupt me." As weeks turned into months, David became integrated into every aspect of Emma's life. He had a key to her condo and stayed over most nights. Her morning routine now included making coffee for 2, and her evenings were filled with David's stories about his clients, his investment strategies, and their growing plans for the future. "I've been thinking," David said one evening as they watched the sunset from her balcony, "maybe it's time for both of us to make a fresh start somewhere new. I have contacts in California who've been asking me to join their firm. We could travel through Europe first. You've always wanted to see the Tuscany region." Emma's heart soared. "That sounds wonderful, but what about your practice here?" David's expression clouded slightly. "Actually, I've been dealing with some complications. Remember I mentioned that business partnership from a few years ago? Well, the audit is taking longer than expected. My accounts are temporarily frozen while they sort through everything." "That sounds stressful," Emma said, studying his face. "Is there anything I can do to help?" "I couldn't ask you to, David, we're building a life together. If you're struggling financially, we figure it out together." His relief was palpable. I hate asking, but if you could help with some expenses just until this audit clears up. I have detailed records of everything, and I'll pay you back with interest the moment my accounts are accessible again. Emma didn't hesitate. Of course. What do you need? It started with $1,500 for legal fees, then $3,000 for outstanding medical bills from Amy's treatment that the insurance company was disputing. By the time David proposed on a romantic evening at Navy Pier, Emma had loaned him nearly $15,000, all documented with careful IOUs and promises of imminent repayment. The proposal itself was everything Emma had dreamed of. David got down on one knee as fireworks exploded over the lake, presenting a stunning 2-carat diamond ring. "This was my grandmother's ring," he said, tears in his eyes. "I had it reset for you. Emma Richardson, you saved me from my grief and showed me that love is possible again. Will you marry me?" Through her tears, Emma said yes. As David slipped the ring onto her finger, she felt like the luckiest woman in the world. "I don't want a long engagement," David said later that night as they celebrated with champagne in her living room. "We're not kids, we know what we want. Why waste time with a lengthy planning process?" Emma agreed. At their age, a quick wedding made sense. They set a date for 3 months away and began making plans immediately. It was during the wedding planning that Emma first noticed her brother Jake's reservations. She'd invited Jake and his girlfriend Caitlin over for dinner to celebrate the engagement, expecting enthusiasm and support. Instead, Jake seemed distant and watchful. "So, David," Jake said as they sat down to the meal David had prepared, "Emma tells me you're in investment consulting. What kind of clients do you typically work with?" "High net worth individuals, mostly," David replied smoothly. "Estate planning, portfolio management, retirement strategies. I focus on helping people protect their wealth across generations." "That's fascinating. Where did you go to school for that?" "Northwestern. Great finance program." David's smile remained steady, but Emma noticed he seemed eager to change the subject. "But enough about work. I'm much more interested in hearing about your cybersecurity firm. Emma tells me you specialize in fraud prevention." Jake's eyes sharpened slightly. "I do. It's amazing how sophisticated scammers have become these days. They can create entire false identities, fake credentials, even hire actors to play business associates." "That's terrifying," David said, though Emma noticed a slight tightness around his eyes. "Emma, didn't you mention Jake went to Northwestern too? You two might have overlapped." "Actually, I went to University of Chicago," Jake said quietly. David laughed. "Right, of course. I always get those mixed up too many years in this city." Later, as Emma walked Jake and Caitlin to their car, Jake pulled her aside. Can I ask you something? How much do you really know about David's background?" "What do you mean?" Emma felt defensive immediately. "I mean, have you met any of his friends from before you started dating? Visited where he used to live? Met anyone who knew him and Amy as a couple?" Caitlin cleared her throat softly. "Emma, I hope this doesn't sound intrusive, but I work at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. When David mentioned his wife died of cancer there, I discreetly checked with some colleagues in the oncology department. There's no record of an Amy Winters being treated during the time frame he mentioned." Emma's stomach dropped, but her defensiveness kicked in stronger. "Medical records are confidential. Maybe you just couldn't access them, or maybe she was treated under her maiden name." "Maybe," Caitlin said gently. "I just thought you should know." Jake continued, "Emma, I'm just saying be careful. Something feels off about him." Emma's temper flared. "Off how? Because he's successful? Because he's kind to me? You've never liked anyone I've dated." "That's not true, and you know it. I loved Trevor." "Trevor was 12 years ago. Maybe the problem isn't the men I date. Maybe it's that you can't stand the idea of anyone being more important to me than you are." Jake's face fell. "Emma, that's not—" "I'm getting married in 3 months, Jake. I'd like my brother's support, but if you can't give it, then maybe you shouldn't be involved in the wedding planning." The conversation ended with Jake backing down, apologizing for his concerns. But Emma noticed that David seemed pleased by the conflict, suggesting over the following weeks that Jake was jealous of their happiness and that maybe they should limit their contact with him. Family can be complicated when you're starting a new chapter. David said one evening, "Jake raised you after your parents died, didn't he? It makes sense that he'd have trouble letting go." Emma nodded, though something about David's analysis bothered her. Jake had never been possessive before. If anything, he'd always encouraged her to find love and build her own family. Meanwhile, Jake wasn't backing down as easily as Emma thought. Troubled by the inconsistencies he'd noticed David claiming Northwestern, then University of Chicago, the year of Amy's death shifting from 2020 to 2021 different conversations, Jake began using his cybersecurity resources to investigate. What he found chilled him to the bone. David Winters had virtually no digital footprint before 18 months ago. His social media accounts were recent, his online presence suspiciously thin for a successful professional in his 40s. Most alarming, Jake discovered that David Winters was a real person who had died in a car accident in Michigan in 2014. The man dating his sister had stolen a dead person's identity. Jake's investigation led him deeper into Michael's pattern of deception. Using facial recognition software and reverse image searches, Jake uncovered connections to identity theft across multiple states. The trail led him to Patricia Nakamura, a private investigator in San Francisco who specialized in romance fraud. "I've been tracking the man your sister knows as David Winters for 2 years. Patricia told Jake during their secure video call. His real name is Michael Garrett, and he's a serial romance scammer who's destroyed at least 4 other women's lives. Patricia shared her case files with Jake. The evidence was devastating. Security footage from a Portland hotel showing Michael as Thomas Ashford with his victim Jennifer Hoffman. Bank records showing the systematic draining of accounts in Phoenix under the identity Christopher Vaughn, and testimony from women in San Francisco and Denver who had lost everything to his charm and manipulation. Each time, the pattern is identical, Patricia explained. He assumes the identity of a deceased man with no close family, targets successful professional women through elite dating sites, creates elaborate stories about frozen accounts and legal complications, then disappears with everything once he gains access to their finances. Jake felt sick as he recognized every element of David's approach with Emma. How do I tell her she's completely in love with him? Carefully. If you confront him directly, he'll disappear and move on to his next victim. We need your sister's cooperation to catch him in the act. Patricia flew to Chicago the following week. Her plan was subtle: accidentally meet Emma at her gym, strike up a conversation, build trust gradually. As a freelance business consultant visiting Chicago, Patricia had the perfect cover to befriend successful professional women. Emma was running on the treadmill at her upscale gym when Patricia struck up a conversation about workout routines. Over several sessions, they developed what appeared to be a natural friendship. Patricia was careful to seem genuinely interested in Emma's life while subtly probing for information about her relationship. "You seem happy," Patricia observed as they finished their workout one morning. "That's a beautiful engagement ring." Emma beamed. "Thank you. I'm getting married in 6 weeks. David, my fiancé, he's just incredible. I never thought I'd find someone who understood me so completely." "That's wonderful. I hope you don't mind me asking, but how long have you known each other?" "About 5 months. I know it's fast, but when you know, right?" Patricia's heart ached for Emma, remembering the exact same words from Michael's previous victims. Absolutely. Though I have to say, as someone who works in risk assessment, I always encourage people to take their time with big decisions. Over the next few days, Patricia carefully planted seeds of doubt. She shared stories about a friend who had been conned by a romance scammer, describing tactics that matched David's approach exactly. "The thing that struck me most," Patricia said during their coffee date at the gym's cafe, "was how charming he was. My friend said he was the perfect boyfriend, attentive, romantic, remembered every detail about her life. The scammer even used a dead person's identity to seem more legitimate." Emma shifted uncomfortably. That's horrible. How did she find out? Her brother was suspicious and hired a private investigator. Turned out the man she was dating had done the same thing to women in 3 other cities. That evening, Emma found herself studying David more carefully. The way he deflected questions about his past, how he had no photos of himself and Amy together, the fact that he'd never introduced her to anyone who had known him before his wife's death. When Patricia finally revealed her true identity and purpose, Emma's world shattered completely. "I need to tell you something, Emma," Patricia said gently during their next meeting. "I'm not actually a business consultant. I'm a private investigator from Truth Alliance Investigations, and I've been tracking the man you know as David Winters for 2 years." She spread photos across the table, Michael as Robert James with Diane Fitzgerald in San Francisco, as Thomas Ashford with Jennifer Hoffman in Portland, as Christopher Vaughn with Rachel Torres in Phoenix, as Stephen Mitchell with Angela Blackwood in Denver. Different hair, different styling, but unmistakably the same face. His real name is Michael Garrett. He's stolen over $1 million from women just like you. Emma stared at the photos, her hands shaking. This is impossible. David loves me. He's grieving his wife. There was no wife named Amy. There was no cancer, no frozen accounts, no business audit. David Winters died in a car accident in 2014. Michael stole his identity. Patricia played video testimony from Jennifer Hoffman, one of his previous victims. As Jennifer described the grandmother's ring, the frozen accounts, the rush to marry, Emma recognized every detail of her own relationship. "I know this is devastating," Patricia said softly. "But Emma, you have a chance to stop him. My previous victims were too ashamed to come forward while the crime was happening. You can help us catch him and prevent him from doing this to anyone else." Emma's devastation quickly transformed into fury. "What do you need me to do?" The plan required Emma to act normally for 1 more week, while Patricia coordinated with the FBI's white-collar crime division. Emma was fitted with recording devices and given scripts to guide conversations toward evidence. The most difficult part was pretending everything was normal. When David kissed her goodnight, Emma had to suppress the urge to pull away. When he talked about their future, she wanted to scream. But she played her part perfectly, even suggesting they elope to Vegas instead of having the planned wedding. "I've been thinking," she told David over dinner at their favorite restaurant. "Why wait for a big wedding? Let's just go to Vegas this weekend. Just us, simple and romantic." David's eyes lit up. "That sounds perfect. Spontaneous, adventurous, just like you." "There's something else," Emma continued, following Patricia's script. "My company is giving me a massive bonus, $500,000. I want to put it toward our new life together." David leaned forward, his interest unmistakable. "That's incredible, sweetheart. We could really invest that properly, maybe in some overseas accounts where the returns are better." "I trust you completely with our financial future," Emma said, hating every word. "You're so much better with investments than I am." Meanwhile, Jake was struggling with his role in the operation. Patricia had insisted that he stay away until the confrontation to avoid spooking Michael. The hardest part was watching Emma go through the motions of a loving relationship while knowing the truth. 3 days before their planned Vegas trip, Jake couldn't stand it anymore. He called Emma under the pretense of apologizing for his earlier concerns, but really to check on her emotional state. "I've been thinking about what I said at dinner," Jake began carefully. "I may have been out of line. You're a smart woman, Em. If you trust David, then I should respect that." Emma, knowing the call was being monitored, had to maintain her charade. "I appreciate that, Jake. I know you're just looking out for me, but David really is everything he seems to be." "I hope so," Jake said, and Emma could hear the pain in his voice. "You deserve to be happy." "I am happy," Emma lied. "We're even thinking about eloping this weekend. Vegas, just the 2 of us." "Wow, that's sudden." "When you know, you know," Emma repeated the phrase that had become her mantra of deception. After she hung up, Emma broke down crying. The stress of maintaining the pretense while her heart shattered was almost unbearable. But she held on to her anger at Michael and her determination to stop him from hurting others. In their luxury Vegas hotel suite, David was practically vibrating with excitement. He'd spent the flight detailing his investment plans, unknowingly confessing his intentions on Emma's recording device. "Once we transfer that bonus into our joint account," he said, pulling Emma close, "I can move it into some high-yield offshore investments. We'll double it within a year." "Tell me more about these offshore accounts," Emma said, her recording device capturing every word. "How exactly do they work?" As David outlined his plan to move her money through untraceable international transfers, Emma felt sick. But she maintained her loving facade, even suggesting a romantic dinner before their chapel ceremony. At the restaurant, Emma played her role until she received Patricia's text, "FBI in position." She stood slowly, removing the engagement ring that had never belonged to David's grandmother. "I know who you are, Michael, and this time you're not disappearing." David's face went through a rapid transformation, confusion, realization, then calculated charm. "Emma, sweetheart, I don't know what you're talking about. You're scaring me." "I'm talking about Diane Fitzgerald in San Francisco, Jennifer Hoffman in Portland, Rachel Torres in Phoenix, Angela Blackwood in Denver. Should I go on?" David stood abruptly, his chair falling backward. "You're having some kind of breakdown. Let me call a doctor." "The only one who needs medical attention is you," Emma said as FBI agents entered the restaurant. "You're sick, Michael, but you're not my problem anymore." As the agents arrested him, David made one last attempt at manipulation. "Emma, please, whatever they've told you, it's not true. I love you. Everything I said was real." Emma watched them lead him away in handcuffs, feeling nothing but relief. But her ordeal wasn't over. Patricia arrived at the restaurant moments after the arrest, along with Jake, who had flown to Vegas to support his sister. When Emma saw Jake approaching, all her pent-up emotions exploded. She ran to him, sobbing in his arms. "I'm so sorry," she cried. "You tried to warn me. You were right about everything." Jake held her tightly. "You don't need to apologize, Em. You couldn't have known. None of his victims could have known." "Yes, I could have." Emma pulled back to look at him. "Deep down, I knew something was wrong. But I wanted love so badly that I ignored every red flag." "That doesn't make you stupid," Jake said firmly. "It makes you human, and it makes him a predator." Patricia joined them, her expression compassionate but professional. "Emma, what you did was incredibly brave. You stopped him from victimizing anyone else." "I need to say something," Emma said, looking between Jake and Patricia. "When we get back to Chicago, I want to tell you both exactly what Jake said to me during the investigation, because it needs to be on record." Back in Chicago a week later, Emma sat in Patricia's office with Jake and a FBI victim advocate. She took a deep breath and recounted the conversation that had started it all. "After Patricia showed me the evidence, I was devastated but also angry," Emma began. "When Jake came to my condo to check on me, I told him everything. And that's when he said it." She looked at her brother. "You looked at me with such pain in your eyes, and you said, 'You don't know him like I do, Emma. The man you're about to marry, he's done this before.' You meant Michael, not David, because by then, you knew there was no David. There never had been." Jake nodded solemnly. "I'd seen Patricia's files. I knew about all his previous victims. It killed me to see you going through what those other women had experienced." "Those words," Emma continued, "they haunted me throughout the entire sting operation. Every time Michael talked about our future, I heard your voice reminding me that he'd done it before. It gave me strength to keep going." 6 months later, Emma sat in a federal courthouse, testifying alongside Jennifer, Rachel, and Angela. Patricia's 2-year investigation had resulted in Michael's conviction on multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to 20 years in federal prison. After the verdict, the 4 women gathered outside the courthouse. They had formed an unlikely bond through their shared experience, supporting each other through the legal process and their emotional recovery. "I keep thinking about how isolated I felt," Jennifer said, like I was the only person stupid enough to fall for his act. That's exactly what he wanted us to believe, Angela replied. Shame is a scammer's best weapon. It keeps victims quiet. Emma joined Patricia's Truth Alliance investigations as a consultant after the trial, using her marketing expertise to raise awareness about romance scams. She and Jake started a podcast called Red Flags and Reality Checks, helping people recognize manipulation tactics. The first episode featured Emma telling her story in detail, with Jake providing commentary about the investigation process. The response was overwhelming, hundreds of messages from people sharing their own experiences or concerns about relationships. The thing I want people to understand, Emma said during the recording, is that romance scammers don't target desperate or naive women. They target successful, intelligent women who have a lot to lose. They study what we want to hear and deliver it perfectly. Jake added, and they're incredibly sophisticated. Michael had created an entire false identity with backup stories, fake credentials, even rehearsed responses to common questions. This wasn't some guy in a basement with a fake profile photo. The experience had changed Emma's relationship with her brother, too. The guilt over doubting his instincts had been overwhelming at first, but Jake had been gracious and supportive throughout the legal proceedings. You know what I learned? Emma said during their victory dinner with Patricia and Caitlin. It's not that I was stupid or desperate. Michael was a professional predator. He studied what successful women want to hear and delivered it perfectly. Patricia raised her glass. To the women who refuse to let shame silence them. Jake added, and to sisters who finally listen to their brother's concerns, even when they don't want to hear them. To second chances, Emma concluded, the real kind, with people who've earned our trust. Her phone buzzed with a notification, another woman reaching out for help after hearing Emma's story on the podcast. Emma smiled at her dinner companions. Excuse me, I need to take this. Someone needs our help. As she answered the call, Emma reflected on how much her life had changed. She was still successful, still independent, but now she was also part of something bigger, a network of survivors helping others avoid the same trap. The loneliness that had made her vulnerable to Michael's manipulation had been replaced by meaningful connections built on truth rather than lies. Love would come again when it was real. Until then, Emma had purpose, family, and the satisfaction of knowing that Michael Garrett would never hurt another woman again. The white orchids he'd brought her on their first date had long since withered and been thrown away. In their place, Emma kept a small, succulent plant on her kitchen counter, something that grew slowly, required patience, and couldn't be rushed into blooming, just like real love she'd learned. Just like trust that was actually earned. Thank you for listening until the end. If you enjoyed the story, please consider leaving us a like. This helps us reach more people.